Okay, this section could possibly have like three different titles. The screen says reduce unnecessary expense of money and time. You could also call this manage your cash flow, but what I like to call it is get the money, keep the money. That's really what we want you to do here. But ultimately, we do want you to reduce any unnecessary expenses of money or time. Now, if you want to survive and thrive as either a business owner or a salesperson in the middle of difficult times, you're going to need to reduce your expenses. And again, that's not just money, that's also your expense of time. But be careful and very, very precise as you go down this road, because if you cut too much, your business may have a hard time recovering. You still need to be able to operate, you still need to be able to advertise. So cutting, a lot of businesses cut too much, and that's why you see them go out of business, because they don't keep all the tools and the assets and the resources that they need to push through. If you cut too little, you may not be able to free up enough resources to keep your business going. So here's what you want to do. You want to follow this process to reduce your expenses. Start by cutting discretionary expenses. Now, these are the things that are really just not necessary to running your business or running your sales territory. I mean, these are things like business lunches. It's a good example of discretionary costs. Depending upon when you're watching this, there's still some lockdowns going on around the United States and around the world, so you might not be able to get out and do a business lunch anyway, but it might be helpful to meet clients over lunch. It might not be necessary, though. It might not necessarily be the way business is conducted moving forward. You might be able to meet them over coffee instead of lunch in your office, or you might be able to meet them virtually over a screen sharing app like this one. Other discretionary expenses might include, if you go out for an expensive latte 3 times a day, or if maybe you have the most expensive cell phone plan. I mean, do you really need unlimited data if you're in your office or at your home more often and connected to the internet? Do you need to, or will you be doing as many offsite events? There's a lot of events that are being canceled. Some of them may never, ever come back. So think about, do you need to be investing in those things? And then the last thing to be thinking about is, are you advertising or marketing in ways that are not generating enough or the right leads? And that is something that when you do your SWOT analysis and when you create your plan of attack, advertising and marketing is a really important thing to examine. We're actually going to talk about that even in more detail in the next session. Now, you want to look at ways that you can reduce your expenses, but still achieve the same outcomes as much as possible. So for example, can you, and we've talked about this already, reduce travel expenses by using video conferencing technology? Could you cut down on IT expenses by using less expensive software, like things that exist in the cloud, where you can just have access to Google platforms or Microsoft platforms? There's ways now that you can work from anywhere. You don't have to have servers, and depending upon your business, that may or may not apply to you. Get very creative when you look at these expenses, because I think if a business is being honest, or a salesperson is being honest, if you look at what you were spending money on when times were good, some of those things might have been a little bit of indulgence or extra convenience. And I'm not saying you should be a miser or you should be completely stripped down in your operating expenses, but you do want to make sure that you could trim a little bit of the fat on top of what you normally are spending. Also, consider your office expenses if you have them. Now, if you're a salesperson that works for a large organization, this might not be in your field of influence, but if it is, you want to take a look and see if your landlord might be willing to either lower your rent, create a new lease for you, or move you into a smaller space if your people are going to continue to work from home. If it's really dire and you're really having trouble paying your bills, or getting into a situation where you can cover off on all your expenses, then maybe explain the challenges you're facing and explain that the outcomes don't make sense and you've got significant changes that you need to make. Now, if a landlord or someone that you're renting from won't reduce your rent, consider moving. Maybe there's a less expensive building. Or again, if your business is small enough, you may want to rethink about running it out of your home, at least temporarily, especially if you have a small team or you're a one-person, one-man band. But there's so many co-working spaces, and commercial real estate is changing so rapidly. There's thousands of ways you might be able to uh, adjust this expense. Now, if you're a salesperson and this is not your field of responsibility, then forget all of that and do whatever you think is best. Now, listen, cutting expenses is not a fun thing. I completely understand that. There can be some very difficult conversations that have to happen. And your team might also have to make some sacrifices. And again, depending upon where you are in your organization, you may have different levels of responsibility for making these types of decisions. But it's possible that in the short term, not forever, you may have to consider giving up some of those perks and luxuries and creature comforts that you have. But be sure that as you go through this process, you're looking at the bigger picture. These short-term, mildly painful actions that you're taking today are there for you to produce long-term results in the future. And I know it's uncomfortable, or it's not fun to have to make these changes, but understand that you're, like the example we used from Oprah's quote in the last section, what you're doing now is setting you up for tomorrow. Sacrificing today is going to increase the chances of your business, your sales territory, the thing that you're working on today being around for you to enjoy in the future.